Seth Kaplan, transportation analyst for NPR's Here and Now. It's great to see you, Seth. Thank goodness you're here, because what a wild week this has been. There obviously is some nervousness, people wondering if they should be flying. What is your right out of the gate thought on what's going on and what you're seeing at this point?
Yeah, so there are a few kind of dichotomies going on right now. People who already had airline tickets back before the more relaxed waiver policies went into effect seem to, for the most part, still be traveling. I mean, there are people not getting on planes now, but for the most part, people are saying, well, probably still more likely to get the regular flu than the coronavirus. I'll travel. But when people are making future plans, they're saying, you know what, I don't know what the world's going to look like a month or two from now, so maybe I'll just book a driving vacation, if anything, to some outposts where I'm not going to be around a lot of people. That kind of seems to be what's going on here. And what has changed clearly in the past couple of weeks is that this is not just about China or just even about Milan and localities. There is some softness in in travel demand in general, even in places that are not at all directly exposed to the hotspots of coronavirus.
I mean, right now, what are some of the forecasts on the global airline industry now versus back in 2003 when we were talking about SARS?
Well, just today, Nicole, this is what has changed. IATA, the Global Association of Airlines, just a couple of weeks ago had said, this could cost the global industry $29 billion, with most of that concentrated in Asia. And what they were doing was assuming a SARS-like epidemic. Now, they took into account that China is a lot more important now than it was back then. But in terms of the epidemic itself, that's what they were figuring. Now, that's clearly different. I mean, there are more cases of coronavirus, more deaths already, with clearly more to come. And just today they came out and said, look, this could exceed $100 billion.
Right.
And those are the kinds of numbers. There was an airline in the UK, Flybe, it's called, just went out of business late last night. Those are the kinds of numbers that for airlines that are already weak could push them over the cliff. And that's how these crises work. They don't typically push strong airlines out of business. But weak ones, like the U.S. ones, many of them were following 9/11 or during SARS. Some of those airlines filed for bankruptcy, even if an airline like Southwest Airlines, which was fine back then, just as it is now, managed through that crisis.
Okay, first of all, you made my heart stop when you tell me about a company that's going out of business after a week and a half of 2 weeks, let's say, of some real nervousness, right? Because it was reminiscent of 2008, where we had obviously companies going out of business, GDP growth slowed, we moved into our Great Recession, the Fed did that emergency cut that was unexpected of 3/4 of a basis point, cut, 75 basis points. So this is not that. But where do you see some strength? I mean, the airlines are better positioned than they were in the past. They're stronger. They have more money. Their capacity is better, right? I mean, what about are some of the U.S. Talk about the U.S. airlines. Which ones are better? Are there any ones that are shaky or you're worried about?
Well, almost all of them are better off now than they were back then. Again, if you go back to sort of most of last decade, it was really Southwest. The list kind of began and ended there in terms of airlines that had a strong balance sheet that would be where you would want to be going into a crisis. Now, the ones that are not in that position are kind of more the exception than the rule. And even the weaker ones among the U.S. airlines, American Airlines, let's say, which doesn't have the balance sheet of Delta maybe, or of Southwest.
Right, and down 40% now after 1 month.
Right, down 40%. But American is still, it's in the top half of global airlines in terms of its profit margins. American today is better off than almost any U.S. airline was when some of those things happened in the past. But no, if you're ranking them, what you see investors doing, and this is interesting, Nicole, go back a few weeks, and what investors were doing was saying, who's the most exposed to China, to the specific hotspots, just kind of looking at a map, right? And now that has kind of changed. So the airlines that have held up relatively okay, I mean, they've all gotten killed here, but relatively okay. Sure, an airline like Southwest has held up relatively okay. Maybe no surprise, because Southwest is a mostly domestic airline, doesn't fly anywhere near China or Italy or any of that, right? But then Delta has also held up kind of okay. And Delta looks nothing like Southwest in terms of its exposure, all kinds of exposure to China. A giant joint venture with Korean Air. What does Delta have in common with Southwest? a good balance sheet, an investment grade credit
There
rating.
you go. There you go. Can you give me a quick thought on the Boeing story? Because these poor airlines already had the volatility and worries about Boeing. Well, now
They
what?
are.
Now what about Boeing?
Yeah, the only good news there is that if anything, the MAX grounding kind of mitigates some of the coronavirus impact, because don't forget, basically a month ago, you had a bunch of airlines around the world that didn't have enough airplanes, right? That couldn't meet
Are
demand.
you worried about Boeing at all? Or you think Boeing's in a great position?
Well, great. This is all relative. I mean, Boeing is obviously in a worse position. It wasn't, and yeah, no, you'd still rather want airlines clamoring for those MAXs, right, than kind of thinking now, well, you know what, take your time, and that's kind of the situation some of them are in. They're happy to not be making lease payments or loan payments on those MAXs. Of all those MAXs that are sitting, something like a quarter of them are supposed to be in China. Where airlines are right now happy to not have any more airplanes than they do. So no, this is not good news for Boeing. Boeing, obviously, a company that went into all of this with a decent situation. I mean, before the MAX, that's why it's still around,
and
right?
They did get some orders. They did get some orders recently, so that was good news.
No, absolutely.
All right.
Boeing will probably be fine. None of this is helpful, though.
Seth Kaplan, thank you so much. Transportation analyst for NPR is here and now. Thanks, Seth.